There's a person right now who is exactly as broke as you, as busy as you, as stressed as you, and calmer than you'll be all week. It's not luck. It's 7 habits so small nobody bothers mentioning them. Number 5 almost never gets talked about, and it's the one that changes everything after it. Wisdom of the Stoics, where old philosophy gets put to work in your actual week. Let's get into it.
Here's the part that stings a little. You already know most of these once I say them. That's not an accident. The Stoics weren't selling secrets. They were pointing at things so obvious we walk right past them every single day. So this isn't a list to admire, it's a list to steal. And here's why it has to be small habits, not big ones. Psychologists call it hedonic adaptation. Whatever happens to you, good or bad, your baseline mood snaps back within months. New job, new relationship, even winning the lottery. The high fades and you're right back where you started, chasing the next thing. Big wins don't stick. Small, repeated actions do, because they're not events, they're identity. The Stoics never had the term, but they built their entire practice around dodging that trap 2,000 years early. Habit 1. The one-breath pause. Epictetus spent years enslaved before he became one of the most respected teachers in Rome, and everything he taught traced back to one line. It's not the event that disturbs you, it's the story you attach to it a half-second later. A text goes unanswered for 3 hours, and suddenly you've decided you're being ignored. The event took no time. The story did the damage. People who seem unbothered aren't unbothered. They've just trained a gap between the two. Epictetus called this the space between impression and assent, the moment where a thought arrives in your head and you haven't yet agreed to believe it. Most of us skip that moment entirely and treat every first impression as fact. One breath before the verdict. Try it the next time something stings. One slow breath, then ask what actually happened versus what you just assumed. That one's easy to dismiss because it's so small. Here's why it matters. It's the habit every other habit on this list depends on. Habit 2. Talking to yourself before the day does. Meditations, the most famous Stoic text ever written, was never meant to be read by anyone else. It was the most powerful man in Rome, alone before sunrise, telling himself who he intended to be before the empire got its hands on him. In one of the most quoted lines of that private notebook, he tells himself at dawn, when getting out of bed feels hard, to remember he's rising to do the work of a human being. Not to perform, just to remind himself before anyone else got the chance to decide his mood for him. Most people skip this and let the first voice of the day be someone else's, a notification, a headline, a stranger's opinion. Try this tonight before something you're dreading tomorrow. Say one sentence out loud, quietly, about who you intend to be inside it. It feels almost embarrassing. Do it anyway. The mechanism is boring but real. Whichever voice enters your head first tends to set the emotional register for everything that follows, the way the first note of a song tells you what key the rest of it is in. Speak first, and you're choosing the key. Stay silent, and the phone chooses it for you. But talking to yourself only works if you're paying attention to begin with, which brings us to something most people actively avoid. Habit 3. Treating one ordinary thing like it's the last time. Marcus told himself to do every act as if it were his final one. Not morbid, just honest. Most of a life is made of repeatable moments, so we stop noticing them because we assume there's always another one coming. That assumption is the whole problem. The brain files anything labeled routine as unimportant and stops actually recording it, which is why a week can pass and you can barely describe a single thing that happened in it. Try this once this week. Pick one completely mundane moment, a meal, a drive, a call with someone you love, and give it your full attention like it might not repeat. You'll notice things you've been walking past for years. Here's where it starts getting harder, because the next one costs you something.
Habit 4. The one honest word, out loud, daily. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius while serving a tyrant he'd once tutored,
a man who would eventually order his death, and he still made room in those letters to remind Lucilius to be gentle, because everyone is fighting something invisible. This was a man with every reason to turn inward, to stop caring about anyone but his own survival, and he still wrote to reassure Lucilius that kindness costs the giver almost nothing and the receiver almost everything. The habit is one specific, true, kind sentence said to someone every day. Not flattery, an actual observation. It costs seconds, and most people still won't do it because it requires noticing someone else before yourself. Now here's the one almost nobody talks about, and it's the one that quietly rewires everything before it. Habit 5. Ending the day with a question instead of a verdict. Most people who try nightly reflection turn it into a trial. Was I good today? Yes or no? Seneca reviewed his entire day every night, but not like a judge, like a doctor, curious instead of cruel. That distinction is the whole habit. A verdict shuts the door. You were either good enough or you weren't. A question keeps it open. What did today actually teach me? What would I repeat? What would I do differently? Verdicts make you defensive. Questions make you honest. And there's a second reason almost nobody mentions this one. A verdict ends the moment you deliver it, but a question keeps working on you long after you've stopped thinking about it, quietly shaping the next decision you make without you noticing. Try it tonight. Skip the scorekeeping entirely. Ask one real question and let the answer sit without rushing to grade it. That one changes how you see everything that already happened. This next one changes how you handle what hasn't happened yet. Habit 6. The empty chair. Marcus made major decisions by mentally consulting the steadiness of his adoptive father, not performing for him, just borrowing his clarity when his own ran out. It works because it's easier to borrow judgment than to manufacture it from scratch under stress. In the middle of anger or fear, your own clarity is exactly the thing that's unavailable, so you reach for a spare key. Keep someone like that furnished in your mind. Real, historical, doesn't matter. And when you're angry or stuck, ask what they'd actually do. You already know the answer more often than you'd like to admit. 6 habits in, and every one of them has looked easy on paper. This last one is where paper stops mattering, because it's the only one you don't get to practice calmly in advance. It only shows up under real pressure, and it's the one that shows whether the other 6 actually took. Habit 7. Deciding your reaction before the moment that tests it arrives. In 175 AD, one of Marcus's own generals declared himself emperor and rebelled against him, mid-war, mid-grief, at the worst possible time to be betrayed. Every justification in the world existed for revenge. Accounts describe him marching toward the confrontation, hoping to win the man over instead of destroy him. The general was killed by his own soldiers before they met. When his head arrived as what was assumed would be a trophy, Marcus refused to celebrate it and had it buried with honors instead. No speech, no victory lap, just quiet instructions and back to the work in front of him. That wasn't a lucky temperament. Seneca, exiled on a hostile island and later ordered to end his own life by the same man he'd once tutored, showed the identical pattern, met with real ruin, both of them, and neither one collapsed into it. That was 7 small habits, repeated on ordinary days for years, showing up automatically on the worst day of a life. Because by then, peace wasn't something they had to decide on the spot. It was already built, long before it was ever tested. You won't face a military rebellion this week. You'll face something smaller, a slight, a delay, a person who says the wrong thing at the wrong time, and the only thing standing between you and the old reaction will be whether you decided your response in advance or you're improvising it under pressure. So pick the one irritation you already know is coming this week and decide right now, calmly, exactly how you'll meet it. When it shows up, you won't be reacting, you'll be executing something you already chose in peace. So here's all 7, back to back. 1 breath before the verdict on what just happened. 1 sentence to yourself before the world gets to speak first. 1 ordinary moment treated like it matters, because it might not repeat. 1 honest word given to someone else daily. 1 question instead of a judgment at night. 1 person's clarity borrowed when yours runs out. And 1 reaction decided in advance before the moment that tests it. None of them need your circumstances to change. None of them cost anything. That's exactly why nobody talks about them. They don't sound like advice worth filming. There's no dramatic before and after, no single morning where your life visibly turns a corner. What actually happens is quieter and slower than that. You just notice a few months in that the version of you who used to spiral over small things doesn't show up as often anymore. And you can't point to the exact day it changed, because there wasn't one. There was just a habit, repeated past the point where it needed your permission to keep going. Pick 1. Not all 7. 1 is enough to start, because the point was never to run a checklist. It was to build 1 thing solid enough to hold weight before life tests it. Whichever one made you pause somewhere in this, that's your answer. Your mind already flagged it before you finished reading. Run it for 7 days on purpose and actually notice what shifts. If this was worth your time, a like helps it reach someone who needs it today. Subscribe if you want more of this every week. And tell me in the comments which one you're starting with. I read all of them. You don't need better circumstances. You need 1 better habit, starting today.